Hi, I'm Dr. Cheryl Bothwell, and welcome to the Wellness Table, where you can expect conversation about real food for real people. I want you to walk away from each episode feeling empowered and ready to feel good. Let's get started. Welcome to the Wellness Table. Hi, I'm Dr. Cheryl. I'm the host, and I'm here with Donna, my producer. Hey, Donna.
Hey, Cheryl. How are you today?
Doing really well. Really well.
Okay.
Excited about today's podcast.
I am so excited. I already have so many questions, but before we talk about all the important things, we have to know how Blueberry the doggy is doing.
She's 11 weeks old, and literally,
Aww.
I am in love. She is just like she's like my little baby when I don't have a baby anymore. So she's doing super well and, but getting huge, like literally growing, like gaining 2 pounds a week. I think she's going to be massive. So she's like 16 and a half pounds now. And she's just, it's 2 weeks today that I've had her. So I can't believe, I think she was about 11 pounds when I got her. Yeah.
Wow.
She's gaining crazy weight. So I'm like, yeah, she's going to be really big and I love it. So
Yeah,
she's super fun.
She's 100% purebred poodle, correct?
Standard poodle, yes.
Standard
and
poodle.
I've
So
never
that's the
had
big
one
one.
before. Yeah. I've never had one before, and she's still not fully vaccinated, so she's in the keep her
Bubble.
protected. She's not immunized. She doesn't have all of her immunity. And so, yeah, we're keeping her bubbled, but we took her down to a creek where there was like no dog, like way out in the country kind of area. And we kind of did that yesterday thinking she's getting close. So we kind of like snuck her out yesterday and she had a lot of fun. So it was super fun to watch her. She's super fun. We had.
Okay, I need to know, what does Dr. Cheryl cook or feed Blueberry? Like, I'm sure so many dog owners are curious what kind of food because there's no way, I would be shocked if you're not cooking for Blueberry. Are you cooking for Blueberry?
I am not cooking for Blueberry, but yeah.
Makes me feel better.
I don't go that far. Sorry, all the dog lovers out there, but I actually don't because I'm actually too concerned about me not knowing dog nutrition. I mean, I've studied it and I feel like it's like we're going to talk today about our topic today, but it's like really understanding it. And I've tried it. I've cooked in the past and I have been challenged by it. It's like, I'm not exactly sure. And then the breeder was all raw food. And so I tell you, I'm going to be doing a little promo here for Farmer's Dog, but I landed on Farmer's Dog that they had the nutritionist there and they're the experts of it. As I'm an expert in human nutrition, but not dog nutrition. So anyway, it's been great. And, she's doing extremely well on it. So yeah, I've been super happy with their puppy program. And so it's just expensive. So
yeah, shout out Farmer's Dog, sponsor the podcast.
Yeah, a little expensive, but it makes me like sleep at ease. It's like all the fruit and vegetables and everything that's in there. So it comes frozen. So then I can feed it to her. Yeah.
That's awesome. You
but
know,
I'm not an expert of dog nutrition for sure, but she's doing well.
Yeah. And you were just saying you're not an expert in dog nutrition, but one thing you are an expert in is human nutrition. And that's why we are all here every single week listening to this podcast, because I mean, I will just speak for myself. I'm learning so much. It's totally changing my thought process when I'm out the store and looking at things. So today we're going to get into something that is a hot topic all over the news and all over kind of, well, I live in Los Angeles, so it really is a big thing here in LA. And we decided to talk about this news story because it popped up everywhere. It was on the New York Post and Daily Mail and BBC, et cetera, et cetera. So those of you that don't know this article, and I'm dying to hear Dr. Cheryl's thoughts on it, there was a vegan raw food influencer. She was 39 years old, a Russian woman. Her name is Zana, and I apologize if I'm saying this wrong, Zana Samsonova. And she was a very, very outwardly outspoken vegan influencer. She only ate vegan food. Her diet consisted of only vegan. Well, she died a few weeks ago in July at 39 years old, which is obviously incredibly young. And it kind of stunned, I would say, a lot of people, especially those somewhat interested in the vegan diet, et cetera, because that's like the opposite of what you think is supposed to happen when you eat vegan. Right. Everyone. So What are your thoughts on this? And let's get into the vegan hot topic, the vegan diet today. You talk to us about it.
Absolutely. To start with, what a sad story. And I think of her family and friends, and I think that first and foremost, honoring that, this is a human life, and it really lets us see the importance of food in living and just our health in general. And so sometimes I'll talk about food I'm big with food as medicine, but it also can be a poison, or the lack of can be, just not having enough calories can definitely have an impact on our quality of life. I mean, we think of third world countries and starvation, and these are always sad stories when people don't have access to food. So we think of that with starvation, and we see in this story that she had protein deficiency and malnutrition. And to see that in, a normal day with people that have access to food, you start out by, our first thought is, what was her diet? What was her thought? Why did she go on that? What was her motivation? And I believe it appears from what I'm reading for health benefits. I believe she felt that the vegan diet was a healthy diet. And that's where she began. But it appears to me from just the simple reading that I have done that it progressed into more restrictive. She took the vegan diet and became more restrictive. And it looks like it's been a decade. It looked like that she was vegan, but it looks like there's been 3 or 4 years, if I was looking at it correctly, that she was actually raw vegan. And then it almost looks like when they talk about the jackfruit and what the diet was, that it was almost like a fruitarian, like just a lot of restriction. But another thing that I thought was really big here, Donna, with it is she was really a believer in dry fasting. Do you know what dry fasting is?
Never heard of it.
Yeah, like no water, like no food and no hydration. And she did these things to feel energy and to feel better. And she would talk about that as a health influencer. I guess she had about 10,000 Instagram followers. And that's what her post would be about, is how great she felt from dry fasting. So this was a combination of many things, vegan for a decade, and very restrictive. But as you look at the pictures, you can watch and see the family would report that they could see the decline, the muscle going down. We could see that this looked like a very typical anorexia nervosa, really, situation. And I think that that's one of the things I like to talk about, is that when we're looking at restrictive diets, do they tend to appeal to somebody that has an anorexia or an inclination towards that? And this appears to be a case like that. But super sad story. And to see that she literally starved to death with food available to her. And how does that happen? And how can we stop it? And was there misinformation for her? Did she understand? I don't know any of those things.
I have a question for you, because I did notice a couple times in the article you're mentioning potential like signs of anorexia nervosa, which I think for the most part everyone knows as not enough calories or not eating enough, correct? I mean, there's probably more of like a scientific definition. What is orthorexia? I was seeing the word orthorexia a little bit in this article, and is that connected in any way? What is the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, when we're talking, I mean, I think there was a statistic out there that how many dietitians have had orthorexia, and I think in general, when we look at how we eat and getting an extreme or getting controlling what we eat and feeling that gives us power, in general, I would describe the Exias in general, that it's a way of controlling our life. We use food to feel in control. When life's getting crazy and we can't stop this or the busy, or we'll see it in the celebrity industry, the music industry, when people are having huge success and yet we see them sort of personally dying inside. And they will try to control by, we see bulimia, and it's, eating large amounts and then getting rid of it, and then just purging. And so there are many levels of eating disorders. But in her specific situation, this anorexia is literally lack of food. just restricting calories so much that, so I want to see this. There's a mental illness. I mean, we can look at this as a mental illness, but there's a level that when we stop eating, and this almost looked like her case, that we lose our appetite. So she may have been following her appetite, and the less we eat, the less we want to eat. I'll have to go back to my puppy on this, but the breeder would tell me, when you get her, poodles can be picky eaters. So keep her stomach full so that she continues to want to eat. And I found that I've never had a breeder ever tell me that, getting a puppy or anything, but it was like they tend to get picky. And so one of the things you want to do is keep her belly full. It was like how she would word it. And I thought that's really interesting because in general, there's a level of that for us that if we go on a dry fast, like she was doing, you're going to lose appetite. And so our digestive enzymes slow down and we start to crave less, and food begins to just almost be repulsive to us. Like you're eating it because it's medicine. You're eating it because you have to, but you lose the love and the desire to eat. And I think that's always my concern with a highly restrictive diet, is that we need to love eating and we need to enjoy the food that we eat, and keep a really healthy appetite, but not feel hungry all the time. But there's a nice balance. And I feel like this is a story of the extreme of loss of appetite. And that can lead us into anorexia. There are other people that just, I'm stressed, I had a trauma in my life, and I'm going to control it by, like if you think about a newborn and they're not going to put that bite of food in their mouth, or the 2-year-old that's like, you're trying to do the airplane and you're trying to shovel that food in the mouth, right? It's the one thing we can control in our world and our self is the food that goes in our mouth. And so that's kind of a different area. But what I'm seeing with her, and just talking about Zana now again, is that with her really restricted raw food vegan diet that she was on, she wasn't getting any fat sources from what it appeared from what her family and friends talked about. So she wasn't absorbing her fat soluble vitamins. She must have had so many deficiencies, but at the end, the sadness is the swollen legs and the oozing fluid from the leg. And that's your classic protein deficiency. And even that, once they get to that point, you think, well, just start eating. You should know that that's literally starvation and everybody around her. But at that point, you need medical help. That's when somebody needs to actually be slowly, really tube fed to get their appetite back. So really, these cases can get very, very serious where you need medical intervention when you get down to these super low body weights and no desire to eat. And we have to build it back. And it can take months to build back that desire to eat. And clearly she lost the desire to eat. Or
now,
she was controlling it.
What were people saying, like medical professionals, about this specific woman? Because there's so many articles about it. I imagine doctors have been kind of weighing in. What was the overall consensus about this?
I found that was the most interesting thing and it's what really led us to talk about this topic today of the vegan diet, and is it dangerous? Is it healthy? I found that to be so interesting to see the coverage of it, where people would get into their corners, where this was a way to say a vegan diet is dangerous. Or this is a way to say, you need to be eating meat to be on a healthy diet. Look at the deficiencies of a vegan diet. So there were many of the vegan haters that were out there that were making a lot of comments. And I found that also moved over into health professionals, depending upon their view of what an ideal diet was. They sort of got into that corner. And some used it as a banner to fly the flag of their agenda. I think I saw a lot of that. And I think that's why I wanted to start out by saying this is a sad story. And this isn't a story to wave an agenda of a certain diet or a certain way of eating. This is a real person. I think we have to start always remembering that Zana wasn't a vegan influencer. She was a daughter. I don't know if she had children. She was a sister. She was a friend. She was a person. Yeah. And I think that's one thing I don't like about the labels of I'm a vegan, Donna, or Are you an omnivore? Or I'm keto, or I'm gluten free? And it's like, the way people are talking about labels and everything, I'm always like, we need to bring them. And this is just kind of off topic here, but I like to say, for me, I'm not about another name of a diet. I'm about looking at each one of us individually and what our journey is and what's best for each one of us. I'm big with that. And I know that doesn't match my health profession. It doesn't match what someone would expect. People want me to wave my flag on a specific diet or create a diet with my name to it. But this is a story that reminds me of how important it is to look at the whole person and every part of her story. And we don't get that whole part of the story. And all we heard was she was a vegan influencer, and we jumped on that bandwagon. And I don't want to do that today. I just want to say that in general, health professionals looked at it as a vegan diet is a diet filled with nutrition deficiencies. And they're not going to get their vitamin D. They're not going to get their fat soluble vitamins, the vitamin E, the vitamin A. They're not going to get the B12. And so that makes it not a good diet. And other people have used it as the vegan advocates have used it by saying she wasn't doing vegan healthy. And that, we can be a vegan and we can still, there's many types of vegan, and we'll talk about that today in the podcast. But I think it definitely, it was great conversation, I think, for health professionals, for everybody to be talking about diet, and to be thinking about what is the healthiest diet, and can you be a vegan? Can you get rid of animal products? Can you trade your meat for nuts and seeds and beans and live healthy? Is it possible? Yeah. And I think that's what I want to talk about today.
I love that. So for anyone listening out there that doesn't know a lot about the vegan diet, why don't we start there? Why don't we go back kind of to the beginning and define what a vegan diet is?
Okay. Well, I definitely wanted to start with that. A simple explanation of the vegan diet is that it restricts all animal products. And in fact, the extreme version of that would include honey. Have you heard that, Donna? That even honey is not on a vegan diet. That's always an interesting one.
Bees. Okay. Tell us more.
It's like bee saliva sort of process, and so I find that to be very interesting. If I have honey, then someone will say, well, that is not vegan. So there are many levels of it, but ultimately the definition is it restricts all animal products. And that means meat, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy products, all of the foods that we make from animals, like milk, things like that. So milk and cheese, these kinds of things are all excluded and restricted. One thing I want to say on the podcast too is that today we're just going to talk, Donna, about the health and nutrition of this diet. We're not going to get into, because there's other reasons that people do it, for moral, ethical, and environmental reasons. And we can talk about those if people want us to. Leave your suggestions and comments if you want us to cover those topics. But today my focus is going to be just on the health of, can a vegan diet be healthy from that perspective, just to keep it focused, because we can talk a lot about it from different angles. The other thing I was looking at was, I just read something that only 0.5% of the United States population self-identify as vegan. I thought it would be higher with all of the restaurant. I mean, I thought we'd shift it. And I think it might be because I live in California, and then maybe they all live here, so I'm sure they don't live in Alabama or Texas as much. I've lived in Texas and Louisiana, and they're not big fans of, they're big fans of meat in general. So it's kind of interesting. I do think California is a little bubble here.
Yeah.
That we think there's a lot more vegan. And it was like 2.2% consider themselves vegetarian. And the difference in vegetarian is they would include milk and eggs, dairy products.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about just in general. But the other part is, like, I want to just say that there are different types of vegan. And I think this would really identify, like with Zana, like, yes, she was on a vegan diet, but what type of vegan diet was it? And it really has a lot of variation within the actual diet itself. So there are various types of vegan diets. And when we're trying to decide, is it healthy or not, it's good to explore what those are. And I would just say in general, or in short, that a vegan diet can be a healthy diet. Whether you're young, old, somewhere in between, pregnant, not pregnant, all ages of life, breastfeeding, not breastfeeding, the vegan diet can be a healthy diet. But it can be applicable in all life stages. But it's important to hear that I put the word can in there. And that has a level of, like, let's check. It can be, but we also can be vegan and be eating very processed foods. Like we talk about gummy bears and sugar sodas and Oreo cookies.
I was just about to say Oreos. You mentioned those.
Yep, Oreo cookies, yeah. And the like, let's say a refined vegan burger, is that good? And we've had some questions about that. You know, is the Impossible Burger, the Beyond Burger, is that
all the substitutions?
All the substitutions, yeah. And so that would still be considered a vegan diet because you've removed all of the animal foods. We could call that a processed vegan diet, or I like to call it a junk food vegan diet. It can be very, very much where somebody is limiting animal foods but eating a lot of processed foods. You also can be on a vegan diet and it's very, very low fat. And we will see sometimes it's very popular. I almost look at it as a therapeutic diet, and we'll talk a little bit about how different diets are, some for different reasons, like we talked about moral or ethics. Or, you know, if that's your reason, you might end up on a junk food vegan diet because your reason was to not kill an animal or for the environment, but you enjoy those foods and you're not particularly doing it for health. So we're talking specifically about health. Then we can go to the other extreme, and from a therapeutic perspective, we see some of the work of Dr. Ornish, Dr. Esselstyn, some great cardiologists, the Pritikin program. He wasn't a cardiologist, but he did a lot with cardiovascular disease. Dr. McDougall, who I personally know, and they're very much for a vegan diet, therapeutically, that's very low fat, like less than 10%. And that even not, they remove nuts, seeds, a lot of the vegan healthy fats, avocado, these things would all have too much fat in them to include in the diet. Even soy will be minimized from the diet because of the fat in it. So that's an interesting one, a very, very low fat vegan diet. You can also be on the raw food vegan diet, which is what this Zana was on, where you're not eating no animal foods, but also nothing cooked. So this is another level that's still vegan. And then the other is you're going to hear about whole plant food diet, the whole plant foods. And I just call it the whole plant food vegan diet. It's still vegan. It does not have any animal products, but it still has, well, I should just say it's made from all whole foods. And so you're getting a really, a lot of salads. You're getting whole, you're eating beans. Foods are cooked, but they're mostly intact, not processed. So we're talking about the refined carbs, white flour, white sugar, not in that diet. So you can see from this that there's many levels from the junk food vegan to that's the one that gets a lot of bad rap. So I think when a lot of people were talking about the Zana case, and I was watching some of the debates that were happening in some of the shows and some of the YouTube that were covering it, when people are referencing the vegan diet, they don't reference which one they're talking about, but they're usually talking about the junk food processed vegan diet almost every time. That's the one that's getting the focus versus identifying the differences in them. And I want to really talk about that today. So my general consensus is a vegan diet can be very healthy, but I also believe it can be very dangerous. And I think it can be too restrictive. It can cause nutrient deficiencies. And prolonged veganism not done right can cause health problems. The example of Zana, because and it also can lead to, if we're already set for an exia, for an anorexia or something like that, or we have other things happening in life. I think a restrictive diet can lead to other issues in our life that are outside of really food related. It's other things that are happening in our life and the balance and mindset and things like that. You're going to see a lot of intuitive dietitians who are really big with, let's be careful as dietitians, we don't just keep removing foods, and that we really talk a lot about what to include or not restrict because of the fear of going down that road. But some of the loudest voices in the vegan community are going to tell us that veganism is the only healthy option. And I think that they will expect me to say that today if they are to listen to this podcast. But I don't believe it's the case. I do believe that there are other healthy diets out there. And I think that other diets can be healthy if they're not restricting. I get concerned when we're restricting a food group. A food group from a plant source, especially. But I think we have to really look at processed foods. And I think if you're eating meat, if you're eating vegan, I think processed foods are a big problem in our diet. And it's like, why did we process these foods? Well, it increases shelf life. I explored, I should say, doing a food bar. And I have a really good power bar that's like keeps you full. It's super delicious. And the process I had to go through to put that on a shelf was to make a 12-month shelf life from it. And in doing that, I needed to remove so much of what was making it good that I found that it was very interesting when we're trying to do a box or a package because of the limitations. You almost have to go to the frozen food to be able to get a whole food that's a vegan food. So the other thing that we know, and I think that can make a vegan diet unhealthy, is that when we feel restricted in a diet, it can lead to depression. And so I think it's really important for us to know and to be careful and know why we're doing it, have a very planned strategy so that if we want to become vegan, that we know how to do it and we go to a trusted source to really learn how to do it. And I'm here for people to do that. I mean, that's part of what I do in my membership. That's what this podcast is about. So if you want to be vegan and you want to do it, there is a way to do it very healthy. And I think it's super important. But it isn't the way many people are doing it or representing it. So I think one of the things I really wanted to, or I was kind of overwhelmed with this week, Donna, was how many people were debating it. And the comments that were coming in were based on how someone looked. So it would be like, well, the person that this woman over here is advocating meat. She's saying, I will never not feed my kids. I've got 4 boys. I'm not going to feed them anything but meat. And this one, I will never feed my boys a vegan diet. And she's like, yeah, we have some oranges in the house, but they're eating. And she's going bacon and eggs every morning. And I might add an orange or whatever. But she was a real advocate that we were designed and evolved to be eating meat as the history of the human body. And she was fit. She looked beautiful. And it was the other person is representing a vegan diet. And it was interesting. People were saying she looked puffy. She looked this. She looked like that. And that is their research on it, essentially, is how somebody might look. And I think it's really important to not look at the body of the deliverer. I think that we can really get messed up if we're looking at how someone looks. It's an advocate of a specific diet or a way of life. That can be where we get into the coaches and the fitness trainers because they look great. You don't have the same genetics they have. You don't know. I've had people tell me about my daughter, and sometime we'll tell the story about my daughter, but I lost a daughter at 17 to cancer. And she began to gain a lot of weight. And I had people that would say to me right in 200 people with her sitting there, I would never do your program or your diet because I'm looking at your daughter.
No.
And she's overweight. And I've just learned a lot of very painful things about how people look at people. And it's like they're looking at it, realizing that I've been trying to keep her alive since she was born. Like I got 17 years and I did feed her a very healthy diet. But ultimately, did she represent did her body look like that? No. But I looked at it that I thought I was going to lose her at 7. And I feel like I got 10 extra years. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I think it's really important for us. we don't know people's hormones. She lacked growth hormone. So people are all going to be different sizes and shapes. That doesn't tell us through one person what's a healthy diet or not. So I do think that's an important thing. And I really found that to stand out. And I also think that it's super important that we consider, planning the diet, having a nutritionist, having someone, a physician that understands if you wanted to be a vegan, what that diet is like, and to be able to support you in that journey, and doing blood tests and making sure that you are safe and that you are getting the B12 that you need. Yes, you will need to supplement with B12. But I also want to say that on an omnivore diet, I get very low B12s in my blood work and very low vitamin D levels. So I tested everybody across the board. And I think I would say over 4,000 vitamin D levels of everyone eating every diet. And I think we ended up saying we found 20 people that had adequate vitamin D levels in our 4,000 that we tested.
Wow.
So vitamin D is sun. And so it's not really something that we eat. We supplement it in milk, but it isn't naturally in milk. So we can supplement vitamin D in any kind of almond milk. We can put vitamin D in that as well. So I think it's important that we actually do this for all diets that we're on. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the research of it, just briefly. But there is a lot of research that's showing that a vegan diet is healthy. These are substantial studies and they're very high quality. But I always like the ones that differentiate what type of vegan they were. And there's so many ways to test a diet. And most of our diet and lifestyle research is epidemiologic studies, which is somebody's filling out a questionnaire. We're looking at how they live. We follow that pattern over time, and we determine what diseases did they get and what age did they die and how did they live, and we connect the dots. That's epidemiology type research. What I find is interesting, and I was hearing that with Dr. Peter Attia this week, just talking about nutrition and diet does not have long-term randomized clinical trials. And coming from actual being a nutrition researcher, I want to say to physicians in general or people that aren't researchers, and it probably never will, because we have ethics standards that stop us from doing long-term. Imagine, Donna, if you had a twin and we put your twin on a vegan processed diet, the junk food diet, we put you on a whole food plant-based diet, and we put your other sister on an omnivore diet, and we follow all of you for your entire life, and you can't eat anything but that. And you're in a control. Think about how it's not possible. It's human.
I mean, I'm immediately saying no to this study.
Yeah.
I mean, unless they're paying me $1 million, I will say no.
I didn't even think $1 million would do it for almost anybody. And here's the thing, they'd still drop out, But here's the thing is that at the end of the day, the research would stop itself, not just the participants, because if one starts to feel better than the other, or one starts to get a disease or more debilitating, or they find results in one group, the control group or the test group, they have to stop the study, because now we do that with drugs. So I think we have such a pharmaceutical model of research of how we test a drug. But I like to really remind people that in the field of nutrition and dietetics, we are really lacking clinical trials, but I think we're always going to be. Unless we give up the ethics of it, how would you have a long-term trial? And I want to talk a little bit about how I challenge that, because I found that to be interesting. So we are kind of stuck with epidemiology studies of looking at, we see the blue zone, and they're looking at how people that lived over 100 years and how did they live. It's the best we're going to get, other than short-term trials where we can see, they took the blueberries and then they lowered their blood pressure, and we see these results, but they're more short-term clinical trials and some of the limitations of that. But in general, what we see in research is if you're on a standard American diet and you switch to a vegan diet, you're going to see dramatic health improvements. And it doesn't even matter what type of vegan diet you switch to. Interesting. They don't even have to differentiate it. We're going to see improvements in chronic disease like diabetes managed, blood sugars managed better, heart disease, stroke, blood pressure improving, and even extension of life. So it's kind of interesting in some cases, depending upon how a person's health is. But we also can find that it's interesting, and Dr. Walter Willett makes this point. He's from the Harvard School of Public Health, and he's someone I respect a lot in the field of nutrition and in research. And his statement is, it's not necessary to be 100% vegan to get all the benefits of a plant-based diet. And I have hung my hat quite a bit on the words he said before my doctoral work. I challenged his work in my doctoral work, and I've come out just having high respect for his conclusions to things. But so what we see is that we can put someone on a vegan diet and we can add some animal products and still get great results. And so that's what I like to talk about today and hold near and dear and give us hope that we don't all have to just become vegans today to get these great health benefits, that there are many of them. We also don't have to be afraid of the vegan diet as long as we're not doing the processed. We can focus on the whole foods, the apple, not the apple juice, not the gummy bear, but getting a really delicious dessert. It's one of the reasons, Donna, I'm experimenting. I was in the kitchen, this weekend experimenting on a coconut banana farro pudding and doing different whole grains to make a delicious dessert, like a banana pudding kind of a thing. Because I'm constantly looking at how can we add more of these plant foods. But I think it's also interesting, if we take a standard American diet and we switch you to a Mediterranean diet, we're going to see health benefits. But if we take you off a standard American diet and switch you to fasting, we're also going to see great results.
Yeah.
So really, it has a lot to do with if we start doing more plant foods, or if we less processed foods. Another is if someone goes on a keto diet, and they were eating donuts or muffins and pumpkin lattes every mid-morning or every breakfast, right? And they now go on a low-carb diet and they give those foods up that they loved, they might see some health improvements. That's why nutrition research is so tough, because we can say, wow, there was benefits on every one of these diets. And that's the frustration I think that physicians feel. They're used to pharmaceutical, research that is randomized controlled trial. Well, we're not going to get long-term trials like that in research. So we have to do the best we can, and we have to apply it to our patients, the latest science information, and really do the blood work, make sure our patients are safe, and to really be with them on the journey and make sure they know how to eat right, and know that they know how to plan meals, and that they get that, like the concept of the more plant foods on your plate, whole plant foods, the better. We don't see any research that conflicts with that. Less processed foods, the white flour, the white sugar. But there's also some really neat studies that we're looking at replacing protein, meat protein, with more nuts and seeds. And that had a significant improvement on cardiovascular disease. And those are some of the epidemiologic studies. So what I looked at was I wanted to take all the best of this and put it all to the test. And so that's what I did with the Take 10. Is a 10-day retreat. I talk about it a lot on the podcast because I spent 7 years doing my doctoral work, and then I spent a decade really testing all of this work to see, okay, we can't do real trials, but I have 10 straight days of 30 meals, and I can just see, I know some people were coming from a vegan diet, and we're going into what was I going to feed them for 30 meals that I could get past the lips. It had to taste good. I mean, I was challenged that they've got to swallow it. How will their bodies tolerate it? So I put I don't want to call it my diet, but my meal plan to the test with the 10-day Take 10 program. And I just have to share here briefly what I learned with the challenge. And I focused on plant forward, 2 different diets. I didn't want to force people to make rapid change. So if somebody was already a vegetarian or already vegan, I offered a vegan, whole plant food vegan option. And that means it was not processed foods. We didn't have the white flour and the white sugar. And we included healthy plant fats. We also didn't serve alcohol in the program. And we were very focused on all the other lifestyle habits that are in the score that we have, the healthy diet and longevity score, where there's 10 foods and 10 health habits. So they were all practicing this no matter what diet they chose. So diet 1 was a whole food, plant-based vegan diet with a healthy amount of healthy plant fats, avocado, nuts, and seeds, and reduced sodium intake. And then the diet 2 was the American Heart Association's approved diet that would align 100% with them is the DASH diet, which is lean dairy products, lean poultry, and fish. And then I brought in some Mediterranean focus for this, where I had the omega-3 fatty acid fish. We served salmon, and we served a really quality olive oil. But we didn't include the wine that would be in the Mediterranean. That was where it didn't align with the American Heart Association. So a diet very aligned with the American Heart Association, because a lot of people were coming to us for a therapeutic diet. So they wanted to lower cholesterol, or they wanted to see a benefit. And you're going to be surprised. The results were so surprising to me because I felt like both were great diets. But what I found was that ultimately my test that was kind of like the ethical, it moved into that ethical level, was the people that were on the diet 2, the American Heart Association approved diet. And let's say their spouse would choose the whole food plant-based diet. They're in cohorts of 20 people coming through programs. And what I found is at the end of the program, the people that chose diet number 2 would literally be frustrated. They had great results, but they would be frustrated because the people on diet 1 did so much better. They lost more weight. Their cholesterol dropped more. They had double the improvement in just 10 days. And that would almost make people upset. Like, well, why did you even give me the option? Why didn't you just tell me that I'm here for 10 days to just go for it? And my thought at the time, coming straight out of my doctoral work, was my philosophy was we don't have to be on a whole food, plant-based vegan diet to be healthy. And so this was a super good test for me to see that if somebody really wants a therapeutic, I really want to make rapid change, I want to get my diabetes in line, I want to do less medication, these people have health conditions or they want to lose weight, they did better in 10 days with the whole food plant-based diet. I tested that. I saw it. Their results were better. But I want to talk a little bit about the journey and getting them there, because that's a big shift. And I didn't even want to do it. I felt like they should ease into it. It really went against everything. But after a year of my alumni saying, you have to stop offering both. You just have to stop. We come for only 10 days and we want the whole thing. We want to get the best results. So I did. So I spent the rest of the 9 years only offering one option and telling people this story a little bit. But at the end of the day, what I found was now we're going cold turkey, whole food, plant-based diet. And I think it would be great for you to hear a little bit about the results here on the podcast. And I want anybody that's considering going on a vegan diet to think about that if you go cold turkey with it, here's the hard, true facts of what a lot of the people experienced. And I would just say, if you're not used to eating a lot of fiber, there's a lot of fiber in a whole food plant-based diet. And fiber is like a prebiotic. It's what changes the gut. It fuels the gut microbes. And so if you haven't had a lot of it, people would start to be gassy. They were bloated, and they would be just almost embarrassed to be talking about it, but they would feel pretty miserable. And they would start to say, I can't do a diet like this. There's no way I can do a diet like this. And so I found that it was important for me to coach them through those days of adjustment. And in reality, I wanted to say, just start with 20 beans a day. Don't start with a cup of beans or a half a cup of beans. Just start with a few. And I would talk about just getting the body used to things, because it can take 7 days or so. It takes about 7 days to get the glycogen storage. If you're starting to exercise every day, all of a sudden you'll be like, wow, I can do so much more exercise now after day 5 or day 6. But that's because the body is storing the glycogen and the energy at the cell that you need to exercise. And so that's the same way our digestive enzymes are, and our gut microbes, they all need time to adjust. So I found that by the time people were at day 3, the detox was real. And I began to wonder if I was going to fail at being able to implement this. I used to say, I don't want to see everybody on day 3 to 5 of program because they were kind of miserable. And I just didn't expect a lot of that. This is that cold turkey, just make a rapid change. And so, but what I found, and I'm just saying all of these things real, is that if you're switching to a vegan diet and you're doing it the healthy way and the whole food plant-based way, and you're doing it quickly, you may experience gas and bloating. You're eating fiber. Processed foods have the fiber stripped, and unprocessed whole foods are loaded with fiber. But what I found is that after day 3, most all of them were coming out of it and feeling so much better. And then day 5 was another low time for maybe 20 or 30%. And those are the people that were really addicted to refined sugars. I began to identify that after program, that they literally were moody, upset, gained weight. Their rings were tight. They're like, we came here. I mean, they're telling you off. We came here to accomplish this and it's not happening. And I was just like, this goes against a rapid change to diet. But I think it's good for us to talk about it, because if you're trying it, this doesn't mean that that isn't a healthy diet. It's literally, you did it quick. You can do it slower and not have to go quite so quickly. But at the end, on day 7, was like the pleasant surprise of everybody, no matter what it was. Some people felt better on day 2. Some people felt better on day 3. Some people needed to get through day 5. But by day 7 was the best day in the program. I was the hero. I was everything. It was like they would worship you, like you had changed their life. People would say, I feel better. My headaches are gone. I've never felt this good. Indigestion. And now all of a sudden, day 7 was a day of, we better check your blood pressure because it's going too low and we've got to start adjusting medications. So with just 7 days, we began to see these rapid changes. So this is my test of what a vegan diet can do with a rapid change. 10 days. I didn't always suggest it to be that way. I sort of got outvoted by program after program saying, tell the next group. Just tell them ahead of time what to expect. And so I'm sharing that with you, sort of what to expect if you do it quickly, but what to expect at the end. And the results are astounding of how good people felt. But I think in general, I got a few questions that would tie into this, is from my Instagram story that I posted, and just talking about what questions would you like me to answer on the podcast? And I found it was interesting because one of them was about the meat substitutes. Like, what does the research show about Beyond Meat and the Impossible Burger? And my just short summary of some of these ways of going vegan. For some people, that's a nice shift or transition from meat. But I find for a lot of people, it really will tear up the gut. It's very processed plant protein. I think people are trying to, it's definitely refined protein. And I definitely find a lot of people have a hard time digesting it. So if you try it and you feel like terrible and bloated, that doesn't mean the burger's bad. It means that you have not been eating those types of foods and your body isn't able to break it down. So that doesn't always make something. It's like gluten-free. If you've gone gluten-free for a reason that you thought it was healthier, but you don't have an allergy or anything, and then you go back to eating gluten, you'll take some time to build up to eating gluten again as well. So I think that's where I would put the Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger. If you love them and you're enjoying them and you're replacing it, I'm not saying it's a terrible thing to do once in a while, but I definitely would say that the more whole plant foods that you can do, the better. My next recipe that I haven't even started, I have about 3 great burger recipes, but I love to see a burger made from all whole plant foods. That would be the burger I would recommend. But some people really enjoy these other burgers, so I'm not saying no to any of it, but I say that processed plant proteins like isolated soybean, the isolated soy is not, I see that in protein powders all the time and soy powders. That's where the bad rap for soy is coming in. But whole soybeans like edamame and things like that can be super great replacements if you're getting non-GMO and a quality source of soy and it's whole, it's not processed. But what we do know is anytime we exchange meat for nuts and seeds, there's a lot of research that shows the cardiovascular benefit from doing that. So that's definitely real research that's out there. Another question was, can you be in a vegan diet and score up and get, our score is a 20-point healthy diet and longevity score. 10 of them are foods. And the answer is yes, because it's about what to do more. So you can be on a vegan diet and score well on the score. You can also be in an omnivore diet and be very plant focused, whole plant food forward type diet, and include fish and include these things and still get a very high score. So I think the answer is yes and yes on that. But my simple basic advice is that if you are considering going on a vegan diet, I think it's super important to plan well, to really understand what the deficiencies are and where you're going to get that. If you're committed to it and you're doing it for whatever reason it is, you may need to supplement with you will need to supplement with B12. I have a lot of questions about B12, and I think we're going to learn a lot about it because it's from bacteria. I have had people say that if you eat breakfast without brushing your teeth, that you can get B12 from the bacteria in your teeth, and that we're just cleaning our mouth too much. Like we're such a sanitized diet now that this might have nothing to do with food. It might have more to do with such a sanitized lifestyle that we have. I think we have a lot to learn about B12 because it's really more about a bacteria and the intrinsic factor in our stomach, not so much a food source of it. But I find a lot of people in the omnivore diet also run low on B12, and that's super important for neurologic function. And so it's not anything to mess with. So make sure that you have a physician, a provider, a nutritionist, someone that you know and you trust. And that's what I want this podcast to be. And my membership, the Dr. Cheryl Plus membership, is all about being that trusted source for you so that you can plan an ideal. If you want to go on a vegan diet, if you want to be more plant forward, wherever you're at in the journey of it, there's a meal plan in the membership. There's exactly the support of how to do it. And you can ask me any of these types of questions and we'll answer them every week in our private Ask Dr. Cheryl podcast and within the membership. But I want to just make sure for any of you that are considering it, definitely, I want you to think about your why. Why are you doing it? And just to know that if you start doing more of the plant forward foods on your plate, whole plant foods, and I love to start with the berries. I find that most people like berries. I did a poll. I think 2 people on my Instagram story didn't like berries, but everybody else liked them, but just wasn't eating enough of them. We found fresh blackberries on our walk with Blueberry, my puppy, on this walk. And I was like, they're really delicious. So berries are powerful. And I think the other thing that we miss so much is nuts and seeds. I think that when we're switching over, we think of beans, we think of vegetables, we think of rice and whole grains, but nuts and seeds are the meat. That's the meat. That was my Cheetos replacement. If you saw my first podcast of how I was using Cheetos, and I replaced those with nuts. And what I find is that nuts are something that you get them in the grocery store and they're already rancid. I don't mean roasted, but just get raw nuts from the grower. Like I have in my recipes, the links to where I get like quality nuts from growers and things like that. And I store them in my freezer and they'll last for years in the freezer sealed. And you can just bring them out and then you can roast them or you can do whatever you want with them. But they're so much better and they're so delicious when they're fresh that season. So I would say, think about adding more nuts and seeds and a little bit less of the meat, but you don't have to get rid of all of the meat and all of the animal products to be healthy and to reach your health goals. But I'm here every step of the way and I love talking about it. I want to cover some of the different diets. If there's a diet you want me to cover, like keto, the Mediterranean, the DASH diet, special diets for diabetes, any of those, we can cover them here on the podcast and really discuss, can you be healthy on that diet? But for the vegan diet, my answer is yes, you can be healthy. And yes, it can be dangerous. So do it smart, make sure you get good resources for it. And I'm here if you have questions.
It's such an interesting conversation. It's constantly evolving and changing, and obviously it's such a spectrum. So much good information. Those of you that have any additional questions, like Cheryl said, jump into the membership. All the links are going to be below. You can jump in, you can have access, and so much information at your fingertips, so many resources, plus the private Ask Dr. Cheryl podcast that drops once a week where you can get your questions specifically answered. And make sure to follow Dr. Cheryl over on Instagram and TikTok at Dr. Cheryl Wellness. And of course, these episodes are also on YouTube. All the links will be below. And Dr. Cheryl, I'm excited to talk next week.
Absolutely. That's great. Thanks, Donna.
Have a good one. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Tweak. Thanks for coming to the table, where every week we're going to talk about nutrition, longevity, and what it means to be well. If you would like to have your specific questions answered, become a member today to get access to our weekly private podcast, Ask Dr. Cheryl, where we will get to talk about wellness together. I can't wait to see you on the inside.